everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. They're some of the first words we hear at the start of every episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. They're iconic enough that they've been memed to death, and all you have to say is that one phrase and people instantly start thinking about Avatar. Why did the Fire Nation attack? What did they hope to achieve? To what extent does it transform the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender to such an extent that Zuko is still dealing with the aftermath even after he ends the war and takes power? These are some of the questions I'm seeking to answer here. For the actual military strategy of the Fire Nation, I recommend that you watch some of Tim Hickson's videos over at Hello Future Me. He goes in deep on the world-building aspect of the show and demonstrates that yes, the Fire Nation had good reason for planning their assault like they did. This video is going to talk more about ideology. At the start of the show, we don't get that much insight into the mechanics of the Fire Nation state. We don't get much insight into its basic ideology. That's not a criticism of the show, for the record. We spend a large part of the show, especially at the beginning, examining those who have been most hurt by the warfare waged by the Fire Nation. For them, the politics are fairly straightforward. They are oppressed, the Fire Nation is the oppressor, and they must rise up if they want to take back their freedom. This is all well and good as far as that's concerned, but I'm left wondering about the other side of the story. This is not to say I was rooting for the Fire Nation, or even that I consider them and our heroes to be on equal moral footing, of course, but the Fire Nation soldiers are not faceless goons fighting because they love evil and want to cause as much evil as possible. No, of course not. They, like every villainous empire in our world, have an actual ideology, and it is important to understand that ideology even if we do not agree with it, so that we do not make the terrible mistake of grouping all quote-unquote evil empires together like they're completely indistinguishable. That is intellectually lazy. We see Zhao in episode 113, the Blue Spirit, proclaiming fire to be the so-called superior element after he captures the Avatar and gives a speech to his troops. And a few episodes earlier, in episode 106, Imprisoned, we see the Warden, played by Jorx Decay, referring to earthbending as savagery. So we definitely have a sense of national and ethnic superiority, typical of relations between empires and their colonial subjects. After all, you need a way to justify your subjugation. If you don't consider yourself morally superior to the people you're subjugating, you have no real moral right to enforce that subjugation. This is the whole idea of what Kipling admiringly called the white man's burden. No, colonialism isn't an innately exploitative relationship between colonizer and colonized, but rather a case of the more enlightened empire, helping the poor, stupid people of the colonial country toward civilization. That's the rationale, anyway. The even darker side of this is from social Darwinism. We, the wealthy and powerful nation, the idea holds, are wealthy and powerful because we are ethnically superior. Look at our skulls. After all, it's survival of the fittest, and we are the fittest, so we should survive while you lesser people should perish. There is even something called the polygenesis theory, which held that different races of people came from different locations, instead of course, what we now know to be true, which is that everyone came from sub-Saharan Africa. The polygenesis theory is, of course, complete nonsense, but it was very popular in Europe in the 19th century. This might initially seem like it has very little to do with Avatar, considering there are no European nations or analogs for such in the show. But this kind of rhetoric was not limited to Europe, sadly. The Fire Nation is based on Imperial Japan, I think that's fairly clear, and Imperial Japan interpolated a lot of that rhetoric for their own purposes, calling themselves the superior Asian race, as they sought to dominate the Pacific theater. By the end of the show, Ozai is threatening to burn the entire Earth Kingdom to the ground to create more space for Fire Nation people, colonists from the Fire Nation. The less other people there are, the more land there is for us. These ideas are so dark and unsettling that it's important to remember that they were once extremely popular. Don't forget that. I hate to mention the Nazis here because Nazi examples are very overused, but there is a clear echo here of the German concept of Lebensraum, or living space, i.e. the idea that for the superior-ish German people to prosper, they needed to take land from the so-called inferior races. So you might say, okay, the Fire Nation is a fantasy version of Imperial Japan with all the xenophobia and rabid nationalism that implies. So what? I already knew that. But Avatar is smarter than that. The biggest problem I have with a lot of fantasy depictions of so-called evil empires is that they rely heavily on semiotic shorthand. As in, they don't actually give you the impression of what it feels like to live under one of these regimes. They just crib some notes from 1984. Or worse, what they think 1984 is. Just to give the impression that, yes, see how authoritarian this is. There isn't any real consideration of how an empire like this functions. The ordinary people of the Fire Nation are not monsters, but nor were they really coerced into doing the bidding of their empire. For them, life is mostly normal. The war does not affect them in the same way that it affects people of the Earth Kingdom, so they tacitly support it. They don't really think about it. But the real heart of Avatar's depiction of this ideology comes in episode 306, The Avatar and the Fire Lord. Avatar Roku and Fire Lord Sozin were friends from the time they were young. After mastering all four elements, Roku returns to the Fire Nation capital city for his marriage, only for Sozin to spring on him his plans of world domination. He sees that the Fire Nation is in an unprecedented era of prosperity, and that is not disconnected from its technological advances. The Fire Nation industrializes, while the other nations are still caught in a more medieval way of acting and thinking and living. It's early modernism versus pre-modernism. As to why the Fire Nation gets so advanced in the first place, we're not given any cover-all answers. We're not given any answers that explain absolutely everything, but it's not completely inexplicable that the Fire Nation does advance so much compared to the other nations. The same thing happened in the United Kingdom, and the reasons why are probably similar as well. It's a unified country fairly close to the mainland. Its political system is relatively stable compared to other nations. Because it's fairly small, people aren't as spread out as they are in larger countries, and there's more concentration in major centers of commerce. There's a lot of trade coming in as well, and that, along with the decline of the rural economy, helps facilitate the move of people to cities. The Fire Nation also has the fortune of there being a close relationship between its political and military leader, Sozin, and its spiritual and religious leader, that being Roku. Sozin says that they should share this prosperity with the rest of the world. Some fans say that he's lying, that he doesn't really mean that he just wants to conquer. If only that were true. That would be a much easier pill to swallow. We have this strange belief given to us by fiction that so-called bad people don't really believe in what they say they believe. They're not actually interested in politics, this belief holds. Rather, they're just motivated by an apolitical drive toward power. But the truth is, most dictators and authoritarians do very much believe in their ideology. That's what makes them so terrifying. The justification Sozin uses is similar to the justification a lot of European kings used in the 19th century. Again, it's the white man's burden narrative. I must clarify that this does not mean the oppressing country has to be majority white. It's just that that's how it's tended to work in our world. Sozin is really passionate about his plans for the future. If you transported him to the present of Avatar and showed him Ozai, his grandson, burning the entire Earth Kingdom to the ground, he would most likely be horrified. But that said, I don't mean to say that Sozin's not at fault. He absolutely is. The point Avatar makes so brilliantly is that even though the country abandoned his original intentions, it still is his fault because he laid the seeds for that. It's not like they completely abandoned his original ideas, it's just a more nihilistic offshoot of them. There might at first seem to be a significant divide between the white man's burden narrative and social Darwinism, but Avatar says no. They're very much two sides of the same coin. The same ideas about ethnic superiority are dominant in both ideas, and it's common for one to decay into the other. We saw this in Germany if you trace the path from the Bismarckian colonial government to the eventual rise of the Nazi regime, and we definitely see it here in the Fire Nation. The only good form of colonialism, according to Avatar, is no colonialism. Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Avatar. It's a brilliant show, and I am so happy it's finally getting a lot of the attention it duly deserves. Watch it if you haven't, although you probably have if you're watching this video. And if you already have watched it, rewatch it. It's really good. And it's easier to watch than ever now it's on Netflix. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.